Hello everyone, welcome to the GeoEcologist. I am Dr. Krishnanand and you have been watching my videos on perspectives in human geography. In this session, we are going to learn about a very interesting concept related to cultures, that is cultural regions of the world. So what is this culture and how it is regional in the world? How this concept of cultural region is geographical in nature? What are its various types? What are various classifications of cultural regions of the world? This is what we are going to learn in this session. But before we go ahead, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and also don't forget to share the videos with others as well. So now let's learn about cultural regions of the world. Now when we say cultural regions, the word comes as culture, and the original word behind culture is coming from Latin cultura, that is basically meaning to cultivate. So when we say culture or to cultivate, it basically means that it is created by human beings. It is something related to not natural, but to human aspect of what we create, what we cultivate, isn't it? Agriculture, horticulture, aquaculture, so many culture that we associate. Whenever we say culture, it means something new is coming up. It is a way of life also as defined by many scholars, like it is what we practice on the space, isn't it? So whenever I say the word culture, what comes to your head? It may be a painting, maybe a song, maybe music, maybe some kind of art and architecture that is related to culture. So isn't it all creations? Isn't it all representing the way of life, the way of thinking of people around in the particular milieu, in the particular given space? So that is what culture is. It's also defined by Raymond Williams, the great scholar, as culture is ordinary. So when we say culture is ordinary, it basically means it's everybody's, right? What we practice on this space is part of culture. So there is another question here then. The other question is, then what is culture and what is social? What is the difference between being cultural and being social? Are they both same or are they both different? So I'll leave this question to all of you who are watching this video to answer to me in the comment box that what is the difference between cultural and social. For now, let's focus on cultural. So the culture, what we observe here is the total way of life that basically characterizes a group of people or a practice by a group of people or even individual, and which is one of the most important things that geographers study. Especially post World War II, there was this entire world which was being restructured and new cultures came up, which we also say modern cultures came up, popular cultures came up, cinema cultures came up, postmodern turn happened in geographical understanding of academics as well. Right? So when we say these things, what do we mean? We mean that practices over the space and also their connotations and interpretations in academics at the same time changed, right? So if you observe this world map here, what we observe, this is saying world cultural regions, right? And when we say regions, it means it is based on the principle of homogeneity, uniqueness, right? So what we observe, there's something called Anglo-American culture here in North America. It means English plus American, that is Anglo-American, isn't it? Then you have European culture, Slavic culture, Sino-Japanese culture, Islamic culture, Sub-Saharan African, then you have Latin American culture, Austral-European culture, Indic culture, Southeast Asian culture, then you have Insular Oceanic culture in Pacific Ocean, islands and all. So what do you observe? These are particular pockets or regions across the world. Now when we say these cultures on world map, it basically means it's purely geographical concept. We can observe through spatial pattern over the space, distributions, right? That is what we're looking here. So there are literally thousands of cultures on the earth, and today every culture is important in itself in terms of its uniqueness that we observe, right? So each contributes to global diversity of culture that we know. Right? And one reason for the existence of so many cultures is what? It's basically 7.8 billion people that can be culturally different. Now it's very interesting take here that cultural may not be at a greater scale. It can be at an individual scale, or few people can make one culture. It can begin from individual and go to the global. Right? So it has a scale involved in it itself, right? So culture can be studied through spaces, through pockets, through regions, and through scales from a local and individual to a global. That's why it is purely a geographical concept when we say cultural regions of the world. So now, when we understand this, the geographic parlance of culture, when we say, it is basically technological prism. Right? It's a tool through which we can see environment and we can see how human beings have, or what we say is humans have adapted through it. Right? How they have made their construction across this space and they have defined the space. They have defined their identity across this space. They have made places through this. That is what we refer to in geography when we say culture. Right? So, the culture includes our attitude, belief, ideas, judgment, values, institutions, political and legal, religious and economic, all of them. Right? Ethical codes, codes of etiquette, our books, machine, our sciences, philosophies, philosophers. Right? All these things are important here, which is important not just because they are part of some sphere in some space or somebody is important or some scholar has said it. So that's why when we say cultural geography or we say cultural regions of the world, itself it is important that it is spatial in nature, right? It has distribution across space. It is important for place-making phenomena, right? All these things are important. So places are not, they are made by cultures. Spaces exist, right? That we study in cultural geography. So what we observe again here, that cultural regions for that matter are what? They are like culture themselves. They display considerable variety across the globe. Right? So a map of the world religions, if you observe, for example, is also a map of world cultures as well. Why? Because every religion is having a set of belief, a set of faith, which is practiced, right, over space. So what we observe here, South Asia, where Hinduism is dominant, right? If you observe that culture, so Hindu culture, if you say, right? So that is where we say this is distinct from the other cultures. So what does it mean? It means that cultural regions vary in size, in scale, from local to global to regional to any scale it can vary, isn't it? Now, some of exceedingly large cultures, if you observe, Islamic cultural region that encompasses millions of square miles of North Africa and Southwest Asia. Then there are some very small cultures like Spanish Harlem, only located in particular surroundings or localities that we say, or we can say 2 square miles of only Manhattan, that you can say is given to this particular Spanish Harlem, or what we say is Chinatown, or what we can also say is Tibetan market or Tibetan culture across cities, right? So what we observe is it can go from one scale to the other scale easily, right? So many others of intermediate size, for example, Corn Belt, right, that we say in the Midwestern US is very famous. So you can observe there is a scale factor playing important role when we are discussing cultural regions here. Now, again we take example from India. So when one sees the word Hindu culture region, what you get into your head? They may logically infer that only Hindus live in that particular region. Is it so? No. That's important here, that when we say Hindu culture region, not only Hindus live in that region. Rather, region also is home to millions of Muslims, Buddhists, Christians and non-Hindus as well. But why do we say Hindu culture region? That means we say Hindu culture region because Hindu culture is the most dominant culture, or it can be said it is practiced by the majority of people in that region. That becomes the principle of homogeneity for regional classification. That's when it becomes a regional. Right? That's why it becomes a region. So similarly, there are some people in Spanish Harlem who do not speak Spanish. Some farmers in Corn Belt do not grow corn. So when we say a particular cultural region, it does not mean that 100% should be only that culture practitioner. That is an important point to understand here. So cultural regions tend to exhibit a certain diversity as well. Their title identifies a dominant characteristic. That is the most important point. So Hindu culture, Spanish Harlem or Corn Belt, these are 3 distinct cultural realms or cultural identities that we say, but it is important that they also have diversity. So they do not necessarily mean that everybody who lives there shares the same characteristic. That is important to understand. So, over time, what has happened to cultural regions? They tend to appear and again they resurrect, they tend to disappear, then again they resurrect. It keeps changing, right? It means what? Cultural regions or cultures are dynamic in nature, right? So they keep expanding and contracting in between. Many millennia ago, if you observe, for example, there were no human beings in North America, right? So what happened? After Columbus went to America in 1492, what happened to America? It had a colonial culture. Now we say Anglo-Americans, isn't it? So from non-Anglo-Americans to Anglo-Americans, isn't it? It changed. So Native American cultural regions gradually shrinked and Anglo-American cultural regions overtook, right? So it means culture is something which is made and unmade at the same time. It keeps appearing and disappearing at the same time, right? That's important to understand. So in classification of cultural region, finally, when we learn about it, there are 8 variables. How many variables? 8 variables which have been taken into consideration by various scholars. Now understand the words here of these variables. What are the variables on the basis of which we can classify the world into various cultural regions? The basis is race, religion, language, economic unionism, right? If there is an economic unity or an economic homogeneity in particular area, right? Then folk, habit or diet, we can say, food cultures, right? Then dresses, beliefs, orthodoxy or scientific beliefs, any kind of belief. These are major 8 factors, right? Or 8 attributes or 8 variables which have been taken into consideration while explaining the various cultural regions of the world, right? So, who are these scholars and how they have divided the world into various regions on the basis of these various factors that we understood? One of them is called Broek. So, when we say 6 cultural regions by J.O.M. Broek, right? Understand the words are Occidental, Main Islamic, Indic, East Asian, Southeast Asian and Meso-African. Now important here is to look into the world map and plot it. All these are on the same world map where you can plot. So the Western cultures are called Occidental, right? Then main Islamic is the Muslim world, the Islamic world, North Africa and Middle East, right? Then you say East Asian, then Southeast Asian and Meso-African. This is 6 cultural regions by Broek, right? Then there is a scholar called De Bliss. He has done 12 classification of the entire world, right? On the basis of cultures. So Southwest Asia and North Africa cultural region, Europe cultural region, India and Indian perimeter, then you have Chinese cultural region, Southeast Asian cultural region, African Black, Middle and South American cultural region, North American cultural region, Australian cultural region, then you have a former Soviet Union which broke into several countries, then Japanese cultural region and Pacific Ocean. Right? So this is 12 by De Bliss, and there is 5 cultural regions by Richard Morrell as well. So you have 5, 6 and 12 classifications. So Morrell's 5 major regions or cultural regions of the world include Western cultural region, also on the basis of religion, if you say, Christian religion dominating, then Islamic cultural region, the Muslim or the Islamic world, then Indian cultural region, the Hindu world, East Asian cultural region, the Buddhist world, and African cultural region are occupied by others for that matter, which is not specified here, right? So this is kind of a religion basis classification into 5, right? So if you observe this 5 classification or 6 classification or this 12 classification, the benchmark or the baseline is again the same attributes that we learned about, those 8 factors on which these classifications have been done by these different scholars, right? So overall, if we get the maximum classification or the world into a little diverse classification, the most accepted or we can say the most diverse is 12 classification, isn't it? So 12 major cultural regions of the world, if you plot on the map, this would be this particular map here, and you can observe all of them here, the 12, and you can plot them on map. You can pause the video here, and from 1 to 12 you can take a world map like this and you can write where what cultural region exists. This map practice would help you in writing answers related to cultural regions of the world. That is important. So now when we have learnt about the cultural regions of the world, in the sessions to come we'll be also talking about Human Development Index and several other topics. So stay tuned, stay safe, keep watching, keep learning, and don't forget to share the videos with others as well.